water bill. Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't work.
You have to keep the mic directly into your mouth to be able to hear. The mics are directional, so that means you have to speak directly into the mic to be heard. There are people outside of this room that cannot hear, so we would like, even if you come up to that mic, to speak directly into the mic. Put it almost in your mouth if you want to, but just you have to keep close for us on the DS and those in the audience. Sorry, Mayor.
Well, that's fine. Just for those people that are speaking in other mics out there, we each have our own individual one, but don't be slobbering on them if you get into your mouth. Okay, so, we're gonna, well, I guess we better call this, can we, Madam Clerk, would you like to do a roll call? Convene
Councilor
this
Marujo?
workshop?
Councilor Marujo?
Here.
Councilor Chapel? Councilor Johnson?
Here.
Councilor Oropesa will be absent today. Councilor Korn?
Here.
Councilor Halverson?
Here.
Councilor Hildenbrand?
Present.
Councilor Moore?
Present.
Councilor Cavan? Here. Councilor Arnold?
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, I guess you're gonna assume I'm here. That's good, okay. So, okay, the first thing we probably should do, since we're gonna talk about water rates, is Chantel has brought her favorite water meter with her. And I think she would like to come up and give
Her
us
favorite, huh?
tell us a little bit about her favorite water meter. Uh-oh.
And it's broken, of course. No, just kidding.
Well,
Do we have a table or something to put it on? 'Cause I
So
can't see.
this is the setup that's currently in the ground. Can everybody hear me?
yes.
Okay. So to get this to work correctly, you have your water meter, which is cam-strung. It is hooked into what is called an ERT. This thing right here. The ERT is then hooked into the antenna, and it sends it off to the digital system in Itron.
And where?
Yeah, icon. It sends
Icon.
it off to the icon, so it comes back down in your.
What this is called the set valve. This is the thing that went bankrupt, not the meter. Set valve. So what this was designed to do, if you had a water leak of some sort, you can call Central and be like, hey, I got a water leak. Cool. They pull it up, press a button, it shuts. So this is the difference. This is an open. It has this gray box, and then this is it shut.
Oh, with the little things.
For
sticking-
those,
Okay.
for those that can't see, there is,
Silver button.
you have a regular ball valve there, and she shows it open and shut. So you can see the shiny part when it's shut. You see a specific, total hole the size of if it's a 3/4 inch, it'll have a 3/4 inch hole.
And as you can tell, my display does not have that hooked up because that thing doesn't work. We don't use it anymore. In fact, we're getting rid of them. So what the city is responsible
Now,
for
which thing, you're saying that the automatic shut-off doesn't work?
doesn't work.
Okay, so we take those out.
Yes, that's what we've been doing, but it is a process.
And that's the company that went bankrupt.
Yes. I don't know what the company's called. It was before my time. So we are responsible from basically this side right here, and then it goes into the backflow prevention, and then there's ordinance saying that the customer's supposed to have a customer turn off for their side, which that basically is what this is. This little thing right here is the backflow preventer. So water's going through,
Check valve.
yeah, and then if it goes back, it's to stop it.
Yeah. Well, is it just a flap?
Just a flat,
It's
okay.
just a flat valve, okay. Okay, so now, so we have the meters that are there are standard meters, and we haven't had a lot of problems with that.
So talking to Oscar at Central Control, he's found 1 in 6 years that he can't explain the usage. I have found 1 in 2 years that I just can't explain. I did talk to a citizen about a year ago, and he didn't have this little backflow prevention, but he had a leak, and so we were looking at things. But then if, let's just say, the pressure drops and a little bit of water comes back through, that thing will register a reversal if it's over a certain amount. Same thing if it's going to have a leak, if it's going to have a burst, it registers it and it keeps a trackable thing that you can follow. His wasn't showing a reversal, but he really thinks that there was like a 10-gallon thing. And I said, okay, well, what do you want to do about it? And he said it was 10 gallons. It wasn't going to do anything to his bill once we had the leak fixed, or he got his leak fixed. But this is what's in the ground. And I sent the specs to Councilman Halverson of the meters, so if y'all guys have questions and want to know the flow rates that it starts to pick up on and what it does not do. I don't know if y'all guys have had that before.
I don't know, the only ones, no one's had that I know of before the specs. Now, when you're through with your presentation, we'll have questions from the council. If anyone has a question, okay, if that's,
Not do.
are you,
That's basically what's in the ground, and that's what I mess with all
okay,
day.
so now, is the black thing that you have there, is that what's on top of your meter?
Yes, that's the antenna. And if this is damaged, which, you know, it's New Mexico, it gets hot, they do break. Or meter readers or whoever going into the meter can pulls up too hard, it snaps this little wire. I replace them quite often.
Okay. And then, so, and that, if something parks over that, the signal doesn't get out.
The signal doesn't get out, but it still functions, and that's when it comes down to a hard read.
Okay. Okay, we have questions. We have Councilman Sanchez. Or Sanchez, I don't know what that. Oh, I've got Sanderson, Sanchez, Henderson, or Pressa. They're all gone, okay. Who's number 1? Who else has?
Me?
Okay, Counselor Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 questions. In talking to the water department, I have had it relayed to me that the Itron system, the Itron antenna, does not necessarily always connect with Tyler. Are there issues that your department has found in that actual effective connection as far as mixing and converting and working with the Tyler software?
So that's more of a Lorenzo question. I just know that any of the new meters since the launch date of this happening, there's been like a bug with Tyler and Itron, and we get a fix on Tyler and then it doesn't work with Itron, so it's been going back and forth since these things were put in the ground, which does make it hard to where it doesn't sync to where we can see what's going on an hourly basis.
Okay, and so what year were they put in the ground?
I believe it was like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not sure. It was before me.
Okay. Next one is, you actually said that the gentleman that you mentioned earlier had found 1 case of usage being off, and you have found 1 case, I guess, in over a 4-year span.
So between me and him, his is 6 years and mine is 2. We have found 2 that we just glitch.
2 glitches. So were those people that called you, or were you actually looking for glitches?
Those are people that contacted us.
Okay, so if those people contacted you, have you guys actively assessed or monitored to see if there's glitches that we have not effectively been, because unless, you know, they know there's a problem. There could be people who don't know there's a problem or a leak. You may not know that there's a leak, but so basically we've only had 2 because only 2 people have called regarding
Yes.
the usage.
But to give you an example of my day-to-day, I go out to locations every day. Today I went out to 10, I got 1 more after this, and it takes as long as it takes working with that customer to try to find the leak, if there is one, or to see if maybe they're using too much on their sprinkler system, this, that, and the other. And go into those all the time, constantly, every day. Like right now, on my clipbook in my truck, I have 65 that I haven't been able to get to yet because it's just been every day.
Sure. Yes, no doubt. Is there a baseline of what you would say is too much on a sprinkler system? Because when people have different sets of sprinkler systems, how are you gauging?
So when I hook my laptop up to it, I call this right here the eye. I can see when they use their sprinkler system because your average garden hose isn't going to push out 15, 20, 30 gallons per minute. And then when I ask them about their watering system, it hits on those days. So it's pretty safe to say that that's the watering system. It goes anywhere from, I've been on locations where it's 15 gallons a minute, and then I've been on other locations. Today I went to one where it was low 50s, but they also have an 1.5-inch meter. So the meter size, the location, the pressure, it all comes into play on what their sprinkler system will put out. How many areas they have, that all comes into play.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
all that is the diameter of the pipe times the amount of pressure you have sets how much water you can get through it. A garden hose, you can generally get about, it's usually 5/8 or 3/4, you can get about 17 gallons a minute through a garden hose. And if you get up in 1.25-inch hose, you can get more, but through a 2-inch meter, you can water about 97 gallons a minute through a 2-inch meter through your sprinkler system at about 50 pounds, 60 pounds. That's
Okay.
basic stuff. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, I just,
In the specs that I sent, it does say how much this can push out in a minute. So I figured, because people were asking me, and I didn't know, I didn't have the specs on this, so I went to Camstrom and got them about a year ago. So when people asked, I could say, yes, that's possible, or no, that's not, and we have an issue.
yeah, but it's, all this stuff is, it's the diameter of your pipe or whatever, and the pressure is how much water you can go through it per minute.
So that leads me to 2 more just real quick questions. First off, so basically what you're saying is there's a lot of variables. A
Yeah.
person actually may not recognize how much their yard is pushing out water more, thinking that 10 minutes is nothing, but if they understood that they could accomplish the same amount of watering in less time because of the size of their pipes, correct? There's so many variables
There is.
per yard. Okay, next one. Are you absolutely confident in these meters?
I'm pretty certain. I mean, if people question how much, or are starting to see a what's the word? If they're not thinking the meter is reading correct, it's not the exact science, but I do keep basically a gallon of milk that's empty in my vehicle. I make sure everything's off. We turn on a hose, and not a hose, I undo the hose and it comes straight from the spigot, so it can measure about how much water is coming out. It's not an exact science, but it stays pretty relatively in that area.
And it matches up what Itron and so what you, because you've come to my house, and thank you for kind of showing me how that works. So you kind of believe it's coordinated, what's pumping out there is what the gallon usage is actually promoting to, be on our bills?
From what I'm seeing, yes, it does match. Like I said, we found 2 over the course that we couldn't explain. So we can't explain it, we send them off for testing and replace the meter. No questions asked. We don't want to charge somebody that they're not using.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
If you want to check your meter, a way to do it, you have to have a gallon jar, and you have to fill the gallon jar up and put it in a 5-gallon bucket. You fill the gallon jar up 5 times, and that's because most gallon things will hold 6 gallons or close to it from top to the bottom. Mark your line where 5 gallons is, and then just get your garden hose and pour it, or, well, garden hose, it could be a 3/4 or 5/8. Your best if you can come straight from the spigot, but from an open hose, but you see how many seconds it takes to fill up your 5 gallons, and then figure that out as to how many gallons a minute you'll be getting. It's all the diameter of the price of that between, and then you have the pressure, or how much pressure you have on your meter, if there's no resistance on it, on how much pressure you have pushing at the back of that meter. If there's pressure pushing back, it changes things a little bit. But it's the pressure just going in a complete open flow, how long it takes to get in there. And you can tell, that's the easiest way, but you have to know that generally a lot of 5-gallon buckets hold 6 gallons. So, just, so if you drop it and stuff, there's a place for it to go and it doesn't shatter the bottom of the bucket. Anyway, but that's it. Each size of your meter is different, each size of the diameter of your pipe, and you can tell the volume of a pipe at which pressures do you have. That's why you have to have knowledge, a pressure meter, to read the knowledge of your system. Every place in town can vary by how high they are, or how much below the tank they are out here, because that's going to give you your pressure you get. I don't know. It seems like to pump water up 100 feet in a pipe, it takes about 43 pounds to do a pipe to go up. So you'll get about 43 pounds back down, going down. That's just rule of thumb. Okay, other questions? Now we had, Counselor Johnson's had his answer question. Do you have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Could it possibly, the thing that you're saying that's not working, could that be any of the problem with some of the constituents are having that you know of, that piece that's not working? Could that be any of their situation?
So if the antenna is broken, this meter's still going to meter the usage, and then it's just set up for a manual read. So it's not going to change the usage, but it does make it harder to figure out if there's leaks. I just went to a property up north last week. She's had a leak for a year and a half, pushing out 1/2 gallon a minute. Come to find out, her water softener was stuck on. So if it was hooked into the system, and when they called billing and was like, hey, can you look and see what's going on, they can see hour for hour. So if there's constant usage, it's easier for them to tell. Of course, the public has to call because we don't get notifications, which is horrible. But if they notice a rise in their bill, it's easy for them to go, yeah, something could be happening, because it's not zeroing out. Because if you look at it in a day, just go by your day-to-day life, at 1 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the morning, are you using water? Usually not. So it will zero out in theory.
So you don't think the piece is the reason for other than this change in price, that the people are having so much? Because at the meeting they were complaining about high usage, high usage, and over half the people that spoke said that their usage was way, way, way up. Because it's not cannot be from the part that's broken.
Not from this, no.
Okay.
And I heard rumor that you guys might be doing a study on Camstrom to see how accurate are. I would love that, personally.
Would you be leading it? No, just
No, no, I would not.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
This doesn't change the metering. The only thing I feel bad for all y'all, and the customers is that if this isn't hooked up, you have to wait for me to come out to your house, hook up into my laptop, or do a gauge test. And right now, I'm so swamped, it's not even funny. It's taking me 3 weeks to get out to people, which if you have a decent-sized leak, that's gonna cost you some money.
So,
Council Moore, I think what she was saying, the piece that is not working is a piece that where you can shut that meter off from,
if it was
where you can
leaking,
shut the meter off from the central control. Isn't that correct?
Oh, this piece?
But that's the part that you said that wasn't working.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with metering, this has nothing to do with anything.
So
It's just a on and off.
so just if it's flooding, y'all can't turn it off, that's all that means.
That's all this does.
that's all that wasn't working was the unit that the people had. They said you could shut off from central control or turn it on.
That's your set valve.
Yeah.
Just that bad, nothing to do with billing, nothing to do with that machine, nothing to.
No.
Okay.
And
The other question is, okay, no, I already asked that, about the water being too high. I found out the hard way about the turn off, because I had something happen on the spigot at my house, and they couldn't figure out how to get the water off, and they called, they said, no, yeah, turn your own water off. So luckily I still had the old fashioned, thing you turn the water off.
Water key.
Yeah, the key, water key, I still got one of those. So there's nothing you can say to help us to help figure out what's going on with all the constituents that are having so many usage issues. Is there anything you can figure out or think that might be a reasoning, well, why people say their usage is tripled and all that other stuff?
Mostly when I go out, it's usually you're watering your yard every day for 30 minutes, or you have a leak you didn't know about. Toilets are a big deal. I find leaks, I buy little dye tablets and I go in and I throw them in everybody's toilets. And if there's a leak, usually that's what's the cause, and a toilet can cost you quite a bit.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I have for, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
thank you, Council Lady Moore. Council Lady Halverson.
Thanks for coming, Chantel. I don't know if you can answer this question, but I on the wastewater, how are we tracking that? Do you know?
So there isn't a wastewater meter. Ernest might be able to explain that a little bit better. So what goes in somehow comes out is like the working theory. So it's based off of that.
Okay.
Counselor, so we use a winter average. So, Ernest, is it December, January, February? Is that? Yeah, so it's December. You take your 3 lowest water consumption months, and that is the amount of water that we consider your wastewater for the year. So your wastewater rate's flat throughout the year, except if you have a leak in December, then you want to get that fixed.
Councilman Cavan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chantel, thank you for being here today. I know you are working your rear end off for us and taking care of business, and I think you've given us a lot of good information today, and you can't imagine how you are appreciated by this city council, and I know by staff, because you're doing amazing work for us. And at some point in time, I know you're going to need to take a break or vacation because you're working overtime, but thank you for all you do for the city of Roswell.
Thank you.
Well, they got a whole team over there, and it's amazing when you walk over there. We took them some pizzas one day, and they never had time to eat them, I don't think. So, okay, Councilman Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
So let's talk about the specific components here for just a minute. Okay, the meter, the company we buy that meters from, if you have an opinion, if you don't, that's okay. Is it a high level or a low level or somewhere in the middle?
I think it
The
functions.
options that you have out there.
It functions. I do like the smart capability, because the old digital that just keeps going might be harder to find a leak. I mean, you'd have to go through and do the gauge system. The gauge system won't tell you what the number is that the person's losing. An example is I went to a house weeks ago, and this thing was still attached. And it was leaking. That becomes the city's problem. So I was able to write down exactly how much she lost from the time we fixed it. So now we got to go back and credit her, which is her right to be entitled to that money. So I like being able to where I can get in and figure out exactly, especially like if I see a leak that's like a 0.2, 0.27, 9 times out of 10, it's a toilet. So it helps.
Second part on the equipment. So the remote read contraption you have there,
Mhm.
what percentage of those, they're on all the meters, correct?
Yes.
What percentage of those are actually being read remotely versus how many do we have to send somebody out and physically read the meters?
So when this all first started, it was a 97-ish read rate. Don't quote me. Just the other day, I was told we're like 72, 75. And it's because the new meters that we are installing are not syncing to Itron. And then also, the antennas are finally giving out. If there was a leak and the antenna got disconnected, the ERT gets damaged. So I've been just replacing parts, or like the meter wire gets broken, so you have to pull off the face and replace that, because they all have to be connected to work.
So we're having to read roughly 25 of the meters manually in the system.
That's what I was told. Lorenzo would have the exact stats for you.
That's all right. So that part of the system, for whatever reason, we need to go through and figure out, one, if it's reading properly, if it ever was. I think you said 98%.
It was not, when it first came out, it was at like a 97, 98 read rate. It was really high.
So we already had a 3% failure from the get-go.
Yeah, that's what I was told. That was before me.
So, Mr. Yatama, that average is just for residential, not commercial, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, but Lorenzo, question.
Well, that is correct. It actually is just for the residential customers that we average out their sewer based on their December, January, and February water usage. The commercial accounts pay directly for their wastewater every single month. There's no average involved with the commercial accounts.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay,
Mr. Mayor, can
Councilor
just
Cavan.
one more question, and it was, Councilor Corn brought up, having to replace antennas and all the different things that you may have to do to these still. What are the costs of those things look like to have to replace? I mean, is it antenna $10, $15, $20, $1, 50 cents?
An antenna is $75. If it looks like it was intentionally cut, it can be charged to the customer, and I get those quite often. They get their water bill and they're ticked off, so they go out there and pull and jank wires thinking that now we're not going to charge them. Not necessarily the case. Most people aren't like that, but we do come across some of it. The antenna, I can't remember not the antenna, the ERT, I can't remember how much those run, but I know they're not cheap. And the meter wire, when I first started, we were just replacing the entire meter, which those are $300. So I talked to Camstrong, and they started providing us with meter wires to try to save money. And so I think those are about $55. I mean, all the parts aren't cheap, but it's cheaper than just putting a brand new meter in.
And about how many residential meters do we have in the ground here in Roswell? Approximately?
It's about 17,000,
About 17,000.
as we'll see in some presented material.
All right. Thanks, Chantel.
No problem.
Councilman Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, you're saying there could be problems with these antennas.
They break.
Have we ever verified what the meter says by the time it gets to the antenna and then gets transmitted from the antenna into the Itron system? Is that correct?
I go out and verify them all the time.
But then, does it verify then that what goes to Itron goes into the billing system?
Yes.
So, you're saying could there be a problem between that transmission?
I know of one, and it was off of Sycamore, and it was about 8 months ago, and I had to contact Itron, and then it was doing a dual read is what it was doing. It would give the actual read what's on this meter, and then 5 minutes later, it would send an extra read that was different. I don't know how it was doing that, but I have seen that one time, and I verify it reads all the time.
So you go back and verify the meter readings to
I
the
send
billing?
it, I send it back to billing.
Yeah, okay. And that does register in gallons, correct?
So 3/4 meters do not register in gallons. There is 2 decimal points at the end. So that would be like, 1/10 of a gallon. It goes into that. So your first 7 are your actual gallons, and then the next 2 are just your little quarters and stuff like that. Now, anything that's above a 1 inch goes into gallon for gallon.
So there's got to be a conversion made?
Yes, and billing can tell you more about that.
Okay, I'll wait for Ernest to talk. Thank you.
No problem.
Any further comments? Yeah. Councilman Marujo first, and then we'll get to you, if that's all right.
Can you explain to me, I've received a lot of emails, bills attached to it. Water usage is less than the outgoing water, the wastewater. Can you explain to me why that's happening?
No clue.
Because I've seen about 4 or 5 bills showing water usage and wastewater is so much higher.
So yeah, I can answer that one. That would happen when their winter consumption was higher than their summer consumption. Right, because wastewater is December, January, February. Take those 3 numbers, divide by 3, and that's what it's going to spit out on your wastewater. So if you were out of town for 3 weeks in the summer and didn't use any water at all, you would be paying more for wastewater than for regular water.
Hey, Councilman Johnson.
Chantel, nice to see her today. So in your daily routine, you're out replacing antennas, fixing components on the meter. Is that generated by a phone call, or, because I can only imagine a lot of people are calling you right now, and is the list big and long, and how far are you backlogged, just to give me an idea?
As of right this second, I'm backlogged at least 65.
65
Yeah.
days.
And usually, before all this happened, I could get a response to the consumer within a day. And that's not the case anymore. I'm 65 and the pile's just growing every day. So I get notified 2 ways. I get notified through billing when they send me a work order through the work order system, or a civilian person, a consumer, will walk up to one of my booths that I'm at and take my card. Or Mary Ellen, our senior admin assistant, she'll be like, hey, somebody has something going and it's kind of weird. Can you look into it? And then I get their phone number and I follow up with them that way.
So you're getting a little underwater. No pun intended.
Sorry, 65 customers or 65 days?
65 customers behind right now.
So like 2 weeks maybe?
And it usually takes you a day to troubleshoot it, give or take?
Well, it just really depends. I walked into a house the other day and it took me 10 minutes. She was losing 2 gallons a minute through her toilet and her wax ring. And then I showed her what she needed because she didn't know how to fix it. So I explained, because I can't touch their stuff and fix things. And then she went and got the stuff, YouTubed it, fixed it, stopped the leak. And I went back over the next day and verified that it was fixed and told her good job. Low income family, didn't have money to pay for a plumber.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing, in my other life dealing in South Springs, we used a lot of 3-inch, 3-inch, inch meters, large meters, and the things that what you find, the meters are generally, they stay pretty active and pretty accurate. Usually when you have a problem, it's because rust will stop an impeller or something from moving or get in there and cut the flow of water that can go through the meter. Some of them have impellers. These might be electronic, so maybe they do it electronically, but somehow. But and it's not. They stay pretty accurate. I know the PVACD. That's what they meter every well in town. They meter those, and you can change them, and they can service your meters if you need to. If you need to have different parts to them, and it's there's what is it in a cubic foot? Or 7.4 gallons in a cubic foot. And so that's when you look at meters that are done by cubic feet. I think it's 7.48 gallons. But so it works. The meters generally are pretty accurate, and your devices sometimes it might be inaccurate, but the meters themselves usually, because they're how they're designed, they're usually pretty accurate. And it's usually rust or dirt or something that gets in there that corrodes up your meters if they've been in for a long time. So, okay, any further questions? Okay. Chad, did you want to? Thank you very much, Chantel, for showing us all that stuff. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So as you can see, we've got the full team here today. Chantel Longway works on the potable water and fixing all the leaks and pipes and meters, the things that we're seeing occurring around town. We also have Jeff Bechtel. He's with IT, and the IT department works both with Tyler and the Itron system. We also have Ernest Alford. He's our water billing supervisor right next door to City Hall, where you've seen the line coming out. Of course, we've got Hess Itema, our city attorney, who based on the former water superintendent's rates helped write the ordinance. And we've got Janie Davies, our treasurer, who oversees the water billing supervisor in that department. I think we've each got a little bit of information for you today. What I wanted to touch base on before we move into Ms. Davies and Mr. Itema's presentations to you is the water billing statements themselves. So I asked Mr. Alford, our water billing supervisor, to provide me some data that I couldn't get from our former water superintendent back when we were developing these rates. I wanted to see all of fiscal year 23-24 consumption and rates applied. Now that's a lot of data. That's on your screen right now in an Excel spreadsheet. You can tell we're just looking at residential only at this point. Madam Clerk, could you pull that all the way to the right-hand side, that little tab, pull it all the way down to the end of the spreadsheet. Up to the very top in your right. That little guy right, yeah, you're getting, there you go. Drag it all the way down. So this is all of 23 and 24 data. Keep going. You can see there's over 300,000 in this table of data. It's a lot. Great job, thank you. Now if you'll go at the bottom of the tabs where it says residential January 2023 to your right, just click on that guy, or February, either one, and pull that down a little bit. There you go. So what I did was I took all that data, sorted it out by month. We've got every person that received a bill. And you can see at the top, billed usage, base rate charge amount. consumption charge amount, and total charge amount. That's the total of the base rate and the consumption charge amount. And there at the bottom you can see the total of each one of those. So we can look across and we can look at the average, the mean average of billed consumption or billed usage there. About 7,256, the average. And you can look across at the bottom there and see the average of the base rate charge amount, the consumption charge amount, and the total charge, the base rate and consumption combined. So did that for every month of the previous fiscal year, 23-24, and year to date in the current fiscal year, 24-25. Madam Clerk, could you pull up the presentation in the water rates discussion workshop in PowerPoint? It's the other one. That's it. Perfect. So also reached out to Municipal League and asked them for the New Mexico Drinking Water Bureau survey, the latest and the greatest survey for the entire state's water bills and billing rates was as of December 2022. Not quite sure why December of 23 isn't out yet, but it's not. Looked at that and saw that this is all based on connections. So we've talked about Roswell has, at the time of this survey, 18,049 residential connections. So looked at the state average for residential connections, the categories, anything over 5,000 connections. That's $41.94 per 6,000 gallons of water used. So $41.94 is the state average for greater than 5,000 connections. Roswell's average residential with 18,049 connections was $25.94. That's prior to this rate increase. What I want you to look at is this slide in front of you here, total consumed gallons, fiscal year 23-24 and year to date fiscal year 24-25. If you could go back one slide, Madam Clerk. Okay, let's look at just fiscal year 23-24. It's an inverted bell curve. And what you can see, this is just consumption. You can see it goes up in the summer and it comes down in the winter. Just an inverted bell curve. So if we could go to the next slide, Madam Clerk. And when you tack on the month, the new fiscal year starting in July and August all the way to your right, you can see the consumed gallons are following the trend of the previous years. They're coming down slightly. If we go to the next slide. So let's look at our billed rate and consumption. These are the dollars billed for just the base rate and the actual consumption rates. And we're looking at all of fiscal year 23-24 and year to date 24-25. Remember, again, our new fiscal year started in July. So you can see that bell curve is kind of mimicked there in the data until we get to August, when those first billing statements came out with the new rates. And you can see what jumped. Total consumption billed. Again, we've talked about this new rate system was built on a tiered system using national averages, and we introduced it during the month of July, peak consumption. Not the bottom of the bell curve, but the top. And you can see that reflected in August billings. If we go to the next slide. So then if we look at the average billed base rate, consumption, and combined total, these are dollars, you can see the same trend reflected. And again, when we get to August, that's when the mean average of total bill jumps up, and it's based again on that tiered rate of consumption being introduced in the middle of July. Next slide. Here's all that data consolidated by month and we've got consumed gallons, base rate billed, consumption billed, total billed, mean average of consumed gallons, base billed, base rate billed, and consumption billed. Again, these are averages there in the last 4 columns at the bottom. But it's quite telling, again, when you get into August and you look at the highlighted areas there and you compare that. Next slide. So now we're looking at specifically fiscal year 24-25 year to date. You can see from July to August where things jumped. And you can see out there the dollar variance or gallon variance, and at the very far right, the percentage variance or increase on each of those components. So I think that tells us something, and that's something I would have liked to have seen in the data prior to the implementation. But I think it's important, it's telling, it helps with the decision-making process. I'll tell you that when these smart meters were sold to the city 5 or 6 years ago, again, before all of our time, I think, I remember specifically attending a couple of presentations where we were told as a city that these smart meters, which, by the way, the debt on that was a little over $18 million. We'll be paying it until 2037 as a city. I was told, the crowd was told, the great thing about these smart meters is you're not going to need all the meter reader staff. So you're going to save on staff costs as they retire or leave. You're not going to need to replace them because the smart meters will be able to be controlled from central control with the flip of a switch, and you can monitor everything. And as we know, the set valves are failing. They don't open and close all the way in every instance. As we've gone out and determined that there's a water flow issue, we've removed the set valves. Again, the company that was under an umbrella company with the entire smart meter package, as we know, has gone Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And prior to their Chapter 11, we were able to send those set valves, those faulty set valves, directly to them and get them replaced at no cost to the city. That's no longer the case now that they are Chapter 11. So in visiting with Mr. Alford and his team, and again, they've been working like crazy. Potable water maintenance is working like crazy all over town. We've seen the leaks up and down Montana. The cast iron pipe was a perfect example of that. Jeff Bechtel and his team are working between Tyler and the Itron system. That is a network system that casts a signal through a network at 900 megahertz. 900 megahertz is a public channel. We are also looking at a potential vendor as we go through and have to replace antennae or whatever the case may be with these smart meters, in moving to a replacement plan that would replace those meters with smart meters that are on a private system where the antenna is below ground. That's an additional cost, but if you've got to replace them anyway, that might be a superior option to what we have. But I think this information tells the story of what actually occurred and how it impacted. But if you look across those averages on the average consumption for each month, there's no real outlier there in terms of water consumption. It's very consistent across the months. Even at the new rates, the consumption is consistent in total across each month. And with that, I would turn it over. I think Ms. Davies has a presentation as well, Madam Clerk. And if I could answer any questions, of course.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davies. So, I mean, I know Michigan got lucky yesterday. You think you're gonna be lucky with that?
USC was welcome to Big Ten football. 300 yards on the ground. That's, just grind it out. 300 yards on the ground. It was good stuff.
Oh.
Well, I guess I want to start with some background information. We're not the only group suffering through this sort of thing. Alamogordo, a month and a half ago, completed a rate study and adopted its findings, and we'll talk about relative stuff, but they mentioned the urgent need for $160 million in repairs, that costs have increased 200 to 400% for materials. The method they chose was a pretty sizable bump to $3.80 per 1,000 gallons beginning this year and moving up 20% for the next 4 years and then 7% on year 5. If you feel like nerding out, I have a list from their rate study, again published in July, that shows how much prices have increased from 2015 to present. Is that something you guys really have a desire to see? Or do you kind of know the story? Let me bring it up. That is not immediately. That's one of them. That's the letter. But are we at the PowerPoint? Okay, so here's where I wanted to start. I wanted to give you guys a little history of some water rates because it is a little confusing and some discoveries I made along the way. So if you look at Ordinance 1041, was passed in 1980. That made our water bill in Roswell 80 cents per 1,000 gallons. Inflation adjusted, and you can see the CPI values on the right and the multiplier if you do those CPI values, that would be $7.825 dollars per 1,000 gallons today. So the rates we're discussing are phenomenally lower than what they actually implemented for years. Now, unfortunately, the city didn't change its water rates for 26 years. And then in 2006, the then council courageously raised the rates to 1.075 per 1,000. Inflation adjusted today, that would be 2.14. In 2009, there was an amendment that kicked rates up 4 cents from the prescribed increases. So you can see it goes 1 to 1.09, 1.1, 1.24, 1.1. So, and then in 2013, the council again increased rates, and you'll see that went from 1.24 to 1.6. But even in real dollars, this is woefully short of what we've been doing. Also, starting in 2016, the city was supposed to increase using a CPI adjustment based on water utilities. I did that number today, and that would be 272. We're charging 243. So, and you guys might recall that there was an issue when I first got here with management refusing to increase the rates that were prescribed by law. I, stupidly I guess, thought that they would only have been so bold as to do that once, but no, it appears that occurred many times. So the city had been underbilling for the better part of a decade based on the laws written. So that's just some background. If you want to know where some of the money should be, it's with the customers, actually. In any case, this is just a graph to illustrate. By the way, you can tell that Chad is a numbers guy compared to how nice his graphs are compared to mine. So please forgive the equivalent of crayon compared to his Picasso. But if you look, we are grossly underperforming in real dollars what has historically been collected by the city. This is now a comparison between a number of our sister cities that I put together this weekend. So it's Roswell's old rate, so last year's rate, Rio Rancho, Cruces, Alamogordo, who's the only one with a flat rate out of all of these. Santa Fe, I chose their seasonal rate that was less expensive. Lubbock, Midland, Hobbs, and then Roswell, if we were at 350 as the current ordinance that was advertised shows. So as you can see, at either rate, we are well below the average for cities within the region. Carlsbad is not there because their last posting was in 2021, and they have an averaged inflation adjustment that was not posted for what they were actually using, and I didn't want to make up numbers for you more than I already had to. So just zooming in a little bit, the outliers are Midland, Lubbock, and Santa Fe. But you can see we're still, we're more expensive than Hobbs just by a touch, and we are cheaper than Las Cruces and Rio Rancho.
It's even a new rate, right, isn't it?
Yeah, with the new rate and the old rate. Or sorry, the new rate is a little, is not included there because as far as I can tell, we're definitely not keeping it. So I wanted you to see what was on the table and what was the last year. So I guess the council seems to have expressed a firm desire to go to a flat rate for simplicity's sake. And again, Alamogordo is the only city that's doing that. Carlsbad doesn't have a flat rate either. So we would be an outlier in that regard, but there's arguments for it. I mean, it's easy to understand. Anywho, this is just zooming in a little more so you can see better where our rates start off. But let me, same deal. I do want to note this is based on a 1-inch meter because the 3/4 inch, while a vast majority of people have that in residential, there are people with bigger ones, so I use the next step up. But for all cities, it's the same. Anywho, when we talk about raising a rate, there was one thing that the water department kept mentioning, which is we don't know how much it'll actually raise. So I did a bit of a nerd dive into it, and it appears from all of the academic literature on the matter that if you look at price elasticity of demand, which is in other words the change in demand for the change in price, it's negative 0.41 on average for residential, meaning that if we raise the price 1%, 0.4% less will be used. So whatever price the council does end up putting in, be cognizant of the fact that the academic literature supports that we'll only get 6/10 of that dollar. Another study does indicate that price elasticity at single homes can be 0 to 0.5, negative 0.5 in the short run and up to 1 in the long run. So there's a big spectrum, but like I said, the aggregate number that is cited repeatedly is negative 0.41. So this now is looking at the current water rate, last year's water rate, and the proposed water rate. Now, I want to, well, first, it does what you'd expect, which is last year's water rate is the orange, and it's furthest down. The blue is at 3.5, and then green is current. And you can see how green just shoots up out of the chart once you get to 50,000 gallons. This is going from 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20, 30, 40, 50. But I want to point out, and this is something that kind of Chad alluded to in his portion of it, is look from that 1 to 10,000 range. So this is going to be lower income people, typically don't have yards. It's actually more expensive at 3.5 than it would be under the old system for the majority of users in the winter. So as Chad said, the January average is 7,500-ish. That means that on the whole, they will be paying more under a 3.5 than they would under today's rates. The people who are affected by today's rates are the people who are using tons of water, myself included. But so this, I propose, if you guys want to stick with a flat rate, which I think as a lawyer, we value stability and predictability above all other things typically, flat rate's a great idea. What I would consider is a modest adjustment where we lower the base rate and slightly increase the per gallon rate. So here is an example. We've put in a base rate that is $2 cheap, or sorry, that is $6 cheaper and 10 cents more per 1,000 gallons. And if you look at the adjustment that's in the purple, you look at that, it links up nicely. Nobody's punished for being poor. You can zoom in there. You see same graph, but just zoomed in a little. And for the most part, actually, everybody's treated the same up until about 50,000 gallons. 50,000 gallons is 1.8 acre feet, more or less. So to keep in mind, if you were in the county and you got a well, you'd actually have to buy water rights to use that much. There we go, comp rates again, just a different view of the graph. So another thing that you guys had asked me to look into is possible remedy or rebate to flatten out what people had paid previously. So my legal position is currently that federal money could be used, but there is a disagree. So I've called multiple lawyers and I've talked to two of our two auditors, and everybody is all over the board on this one. So there's not consensus, and I prefer to give you a consensus view when possible. However, we don't really have to do that necessarily. If we were to, this is assuming a 3.6 based on my modest proposal. There's a couple different ways where we can just even everybody's bills out. So if we would phase in a water price. We could do it quickly, where if we went to 154 a gallon for 2 months and then we went to 3.6, everybody's the same. Similarly, if we went to 257 for 4 months and then 3.6, everybody would have paid the exact same amount. And then the one I'd prefer is progressive, so people can get used to the new rates. If we go from $2 a gallon to 233 to 237 to 328, then to 360 in January, everybody's bill would have been the same as if we started off at 360. Presently, because of the confusion with the rates, we have not been shutting anybody's water off, and anybody who comes in for a plan gets it automatically. Is that right, Mr. Alford?
That's correct.
So everybody, the way it would work in simplest terms is we just say, get your bills current by January, and that's when we start new again. Here's the final predictable rate. Now, the one thing, and that's just another graph because I learned how to make graphs on Excel this weekend. Sorry. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is the third rail here. It's the wastewater rate. So wastewater rates are done by December, January, February averages. If we look at this, you can see that our old rates were even cheaper for higher end users than Hobbs. I don't think that's advisable. Hobbs has a lot more money than we do. By contrast, our new rates for wastewater are actually pretty high for the higher end users, and they're still high for the low end users. Given and this is just breaks it out a little cleaner so you can see. So Roswell's new rates are kind of up there. The one that I'd advise is Alamogordo. Their town is about the same size. A lot of their infrastructure came in at the same time ours did. And it would be predictable and potentially prudent to just adopt Alamogordo's wastewater rates, which would be a big drop from what we're currently doing. To put in perspective, the numbers are up there, but if you're in Alamogordo, you'd be paying $25 as opposed to $26.50 for no wastewater. And then we would move to, instead of $50 for 10,000, it drops you down to 40. So it's an appreciable difference. And again, the wastewater part of the study that the city did is less compelling to me than the water rate study. And I know that some of you weren't convinced by the additional rate study to begin with. So I think that piggybacking off of somebody else's work is prudent until we can get a professional group here that specializes in setting these things to look at it for us. That's what I got for you. Do you want to see any of those again?
Okay, do we have any questions? Council Lady Arnold.
Thank you. Those were actually very good charts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. So how many of these cities that you're noting here actually have a tiered system? You said pretty much all of them, but
Yeah.
Alamogordo?
Everyone but Alamogordo.
Okay. So do you know the history of their rollouts? Because that's actually, I don't have qualms about the rate. I have no doubt in my mind that we do have to raise the rate, and I appreciate you lining it out like this and showing us that. My question is if the tiered system is used in other communities and very effective, why didn't it work here? Is our usage correct? Can we attest to the fact that that our usage is on? That's what throws me off.
Yeah. So I did a usage regression based on different numbers than Chad had, and our numbers are spectacularly close. I got 6,800, and I was using average numbers, so there'd be a lot more rounding error. in the winter, and I got 17,000 or so in the summer. If you think about it this way, if the average American uses 80 gallons a day and you have 3 people in a house for about 48,000 households, it syncs up to average American use in the winter. And in the summer, it should be higher here. We're really hot, and we got bigger yards, and our families are bigger than the average American family.
Okay, so again, I'm kind of thrown off with that because I have a copy of a bill of a family of 3 members, yard, a house bigger than mine, 18,000 gallons a month. In the month where I use 45,000, me and my dog. So, and I have cross variances of these consistently. I have a 1.5 to 2 inch meter, and I haven't gotten anyone to explain how I used 45,000, and I can attest and swear under oath that I have not. So, this plagues me because I completely agree. I actually liked, I liked your progressive concept of going up, accordingly, starting with this average rate and then moving up and getting people used to it. But again, my biggest concern is it doesn't matter what rate we actually apply if it's not correct usage. And I actually do not believe that it's incorrect usage across the board. I think there's somewhere where there's a hole. Haven't figured it out yet. I think there may be several variables as far as what's causing flaws, but to say that people are just using a whole lot of water and not knowing it, that kind of throws me. But it also leads me back to ask the history of a couple things. So the system, the meters were installed and brought in, I believe, what you said 5 to 6 years ago. I believe that was what, 2018?
Yeah, I think 18 is when we
Yes.
issued the bond.
So let me ask you, what kind of billing software system did we have at that time?
That I do not know.
It was a company called HTE.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of product was it? Was it like just a typical software system, or what kind of computer system did it use?
It was a typical software system, more a little bit archaic, the green screens and things like that.
Like the MS-DOS?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we then converted, what year did we convert? Because I know we actually took a time period where we converted to Tyler. Is that correct?
We converted utility billing in December of 2020.
In December of 2020 to Tyler?
To Tyler.
Okay. And so a conversion from a DOS program to what kind of, is Tyler DOS?
It's a web-based software.
Okay. How many accounts did, when we converted, because what I am aware of is that there has been some issues in that conversion, because how many people helped convert that over? Can you kind of give me the history of that conversion?
No, because none of us were here when that happened. And none of the billing staff in Ernest's office are still here either.
So no one here can attest that that actual conversion was done accurately and that there are no glitches, or no one has any clue? If we have any glitches and that went smoothly and everything is fine from that conversion?
No, I think once the conversion took place, and then as people came in, they went in and tried to correct that. I'll give you an example. When I started in 21, the winter quarter average that Hess has talked about was based on 1,000 gallons. So the winter quarter average in HTE would be 7 for 7,000 gallons. In Tyler, it shouldn't have been a 7. It should have been the 7,000, because it needed to have the zeros on there, because otherwise how Tyler looked at it was just as a 7. So as time went on and we got to looking at the conversion, we went in and corrected some of those. But like you said, we're talking 19,000 accounts. When you look at all of the residential and the commercial together, you're looking at touching 19,000 accounts.
Okay, yes, exactly. I think a lot of what I'm trying to say here, but using questions, is I absolutely believe that, our group here has no malicious intent. There isn't anything that I'm thinking that you guys have done that's wrong. What concerns me is that there's a whole lot of stuff that has happened in a 5 to 6 time frame. We have limited staff. We have staff that actually has no prior knowledge. We have a lot of different conversions, different systems. As I understand it, we have a third-party billing system. Is that correct as well?
The third party is the one that actually prints the bills,
Okay.
and mails them out. But the data comes out of Tyler that they use to generate those bills.
Okay, and have we worked to determine that conversion from our Tyler system, our information is sent to a Tyler system or a separate type of software system?
It's a separate site. It's a data file that comes out of Tyler that Ernest sends to the billing company, and they convert it into what the bill looks like.
Okay, and so I understand that Tyler, the software company, has programs that help assess a water use, the water billing. Is there actually assistance or any programs that they offer to help us do studies or compile information? Or, because that's what I've been hearing, is that Tyler has the ability to assess our numbers, run tests on it. Is that true? Does anyone know that?
Ernest, can you answer?
So no, I have not looked into anyone trying to help us out with the study or anything of that nature. What I can speak to is that with the billing, most of the accounts, if there's an issue with the account, it's been going on for a while, because what we've seen is a lot of customers coming in and saying that their consumption's higher, but when we look in the system, the consumption is pretty consistent. And so the issue is that now that the rate's higher and that they're paying a higher dollar amount, everyone assumes that their meter is wrong. And I have not seen a bunch of those. I've seen a couple here and there where there were issues, but I'm not seeing that issue where the consumption's doubling and things of that nature. But no, I do not have any knowledge of any company or Tyler being able to help out with the rate study or anything of that nature.
Okay, so that would lead me to ask you, Ernest, have you actually compiled an actual pulled documents and done assessments? And it's really hard, because sitting in your office, having a relatability to these people and understanding personal usage is very difficult. I mean, basically, you just see that they use that. You don't understand their actual day-to-day activities, correct?
Correct. I've had conversations with customers just to try to help them troubleshoot what's going on. Most of the time what we're finding is that people are watering a lot, and so those blips, or there's leaks in their watering system. Like Chantel talked about, the water softener staying open, running toilets, things of that nature that account for the higher consumption. And then we've had a couple issues here and there. I ran across an account yesterday that it undercharged them in the month of July, and then it made up for that consumption on the next month, and it was all Itron. It was an issue with Itron, and I don't know if the meter was parked over or anything of that nature, but there's been few and far between where the consumption is questionable. Most of the time, it's pretty accurate. It's not 100%, but it's in one billing cycle, we're probably sending about 50 to 55 work orders out to have them reread out of a cycle that includes maybe 900 accounts.
Okay. Like I said, it makes me actually very nervous, because we have a lot of decisions that have been made in a short amount of time, and I actually don't feel that we've actually taken the appropriate steps. I mean, we spent pretty much a year and a half going over these rates and having that. And in my understanding, tiered systems are implemented all the time in many cities, in many places. And I don't actually believe it was a bad concept. And I would really like to know, I don't think the one question I ever thought to ask is, how was the implementation when you first began this? Did you have people, I would like to ask of these cities, when you rolled it out, did you have people that went like an RV, senior citizen RV park that went from $2,500 a month to $9,000 a month? So that it kind of, that's where it kind of gets me, is I think that our tiered system should have actually been a lot smoother, but the usage, I have issues because I'm just keep getting information that's telling me that's, it's just not looking right. I don't know if it's billing. I wonder if there's a conversion issue with billing, because as I've been told, there's a pretty much 75% accuracy rate, and that there's about 25% that seem to be off. How do we figure out what that 25% is unless those people come into us and tell us? How do we actually do a study? So to sit here and I'm not confident, and I have not been confident since the get-go, that we're actually taking the appropriate amount of time to implement something like this. But again, I've stressed that, and I'm still not comfortable with it. But thank you.
If I could kind of follow up on that, I understand your point where you're coming from is in regards to that. A couple of the RV parks that I looked at, they're using hundreds of thousands of gallons that went from a flat rate of $2.43 per thousand gallon after the first 3,000 to now it's on a tiered system that can start anywhere at $2.83 and top out at $5.66 per thousand gallon. If they're using 200,000 gallons at that rate and it's at $5.66, which is more than double what we were charging before, that accounts for those increases. It's not that the consumption's all over the place, it's the fact that the rate at the top is more than double what they were being charged before. And then it falls in whether they're a small commercial or large commercial, because then those base rates that went in for the sewer for just the first 3,000 gallons, all that attributes to that. And that's what I'm seeing from the ground level, is just that the consumption is still the same. It's just that it's at a much higher rate whenever they top out. And so instead of, again, that 243 per thousand gallon, they're starting off at a rate that's already higher than what it was, and it just keeps climbing. It keeps climbing, and then, like I said, at the top, it's double. And that's kind of just how it is.
Well,
Yeah, wait, hold on just a minute. Now, you have to look at the tiered system and see what happened. When we went from a flat rate, the tiered system, like he said, you doubled, on a lot of these people, you doubled the price as you went up. Now, Roswell, when you look at a tiered system is used to discourage use among people in most of the cities, because most cities have a limited amount of water. And when you look, if you're in anybody east of the Pecos River is on the Ogallala Aquifer, and that goes all the way through Kansas and Nebraska, and no one controls any access that I'm aware of in any of those states to the amount of water you pump out. But you have to look at it as a lake going down and goes over, and it gets deeper into Kansas and Nebraska than it is in New Mexico. And so in New Mexico, we do monitor the use. But as soon as you go across the state line to Texas, you can pump whatever the hell you please to pump. And so that's why you have places like Clovis and Portales that are out of water. Their level of water that they have to suck from is maybe, say it's 20 feet deep. And as you go towards Texas, it gets deeper. But when you get to Nebraska and Kansas, it gets real deep. But here, and what they're having in Portales and Clovis, why they have a problem, why they go to tiered water, the more you use, the more you want you to pay, so you pay more money because they're gonna have to find water somewhere else.
sure.
And here, we have the mountains over here, and this Pecos River is one of the only rechargeable basins in anywhere around here that I know of that is totally, really rechargeable. And that's one of the reasons why the Pecos River here, we have almost unlimited water, but yet it gets down, when we get down into what we've agreed to let to go to Texas, because they're on that system down below us in Carlsbad. All of us along here are on that, from the Pecos, from the town of Pecos, down here, it's all in this watershed. That's why when you go look at Santa Fe, they get their water out of the Rio Grande, so does Albuquerque. And you look at, and it goes all the way down through Las Cruces, everywhere, they all go to the Rio Grande. There's limited amounts of water that they can get. So they have to have a tiered system to discourage use. But we don't have that problem. Roswell bought up a lot of water rights over the years. And so our city is very well fixed for water. So we don't have to go to a tiered system. That was just the choice of how everybody else did it and how they probably did it in Spearfish. It's why all of a sudden we came and we got this new system that we weren't using before. Now there's more people that use a tiered system than there are that don't. And we're just in an anomaly here where we don't need to have a tiered system. And that's why when you look sometimes in where we charge double for somebody who lives outside of town. Well, some of the areas outside of town have saltwater encroachment. And where that is bad, out by the country club, you have brackish water, and those people all shop and everything else here. We don't provide their pipes. They put their pipes and we just let them buy it. And so, in some respects, it's almost like not being a good neighbor, charging them all kinds of money when they do everything else here in town. And so that's why $2 or twice as much might be too much to charge them for that privilege. But if you look in here, Alamogordo has huge problems with brackish water. They are looking at saline, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in Alamogordo, they look at changing brackish water into fresh water so they have enough water to drink. And Las Cruces has problems having enough water as well, because what comes down the Rio Grande, and like right now, not having enough water in their lake, they're at 7% in Elephant Butte Lake. So that's, when that thing was full, I mean, it holds millions and millions of gallons of water. And but Texas has a claim on that too, so there's problems there, just like Texas has a claim on the water we have. And that's why it's, Rio Rancho has a problem getting water. And Santa Fe has come down and wanted to put pipelines. A guy named Green wanted to buy water from Pecos and send it all the way up the highway to Santa Fe, because Santa Fe's running out of water. And so that's why they have a tiered system. We just, quite frankly, we never had one. We never needed one because we had plenty of water. But when we got a new water guy that didn't really know that much about the water system here, or where our water comes from, out of these mountains, and when he went to the tiered system, and we really don't have to have one until we get significant more usage. And so that's just how this thing developed. So you really, in a lot of respects, it doesn't hurt us to not go to a tiered system. For conservation, yes, it makes a lot of sense. So people don't use water. But we don't have a shortage of water, not anything like the other people where they are in a defined bathtub and theirs is going away.
Mayor, could you closer to your mic, because you get lighter.
So they have over there on the east of us, they're in a defined bathtub and their water is going away. And it's somewhat similar to that in Alamogordo and Las Cruces. So we don't really need to go to such a drastic effect as having the tiered system. But for conservation-wise, the more it costs, the more people complain. I think we've had a good example of that. And so that's just one thing to look at. So we really don't need the tiered system, but if we can adjust it and get pretty well where we're going. Some of these things look, I hate to say it, I guess, I don't know if that came from Michigan or Harvard, but some of these studies that he has here really make a little, pretty good sense.
You mean Mr. Eintema? Yeah.
hard, but I did it. I came out and said it.
I actually do value his studies, but I did want to ask, because I happen to agree with Mr. Cole on, we were given 5 cities that actually used a tiered system. They looked effective, but I kind of question, did we not actually study the rollout and the implementation of what that would look like? I mean, I think our senior living RV parks, you know, I understand that the usage is consistent, but it might have behooved us to say, hey guys, here's a memo, you know, and because that wasn't presented to us. I mean, what was presented is those people that are abusing water will actually feel, you know, the difference. But when we were asked what's the average usage, it was 20,000 gallons is the average usage. And then I, of course, go into my house, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not my average use. And it hasn't been since, you know, because I see a difference in my billing from 2017 to 2018 and then to 2020. There is in 2017, I was at 18,000 gallons in July. So that's why something's off to me, and I'll probably not get over that. However, we do have to move on. But I'm just saying, when we knew that was going to happen, or when our water department staff knew that was going to happen to a senior living facility, to a mobile home park, to these places, and because no one can afford $9,000 of water usage, not an RV park. It's not even realistic. That's actually, it's ludicrous to even think that we could bill someone that, because we smacked them, and I don't think they completely comprehended how they were going to be smacked. There were people here that attended all of those 17 public meetings that we had. They had an idea, but I think there was some onus on us to have informed them of what that looked like. And Mr. Cole, as you said, a chart and a graph or something of what that would have looked like would have been very helpful. And it, you know, if you don't study tiered systems, you don't think to ask for that. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? I have Counselor Moore.
Couple of quick questions. I kind of like what Mr. Idema was saying about, but I do like to understand that a little better about the increase, the 20 increase. You know, what you were saying about the flat rate. I mean, a 20% increase every year or every other year or something like that.
Yeah, so if you look at Alamogordo's ordinance, which I didn't print out for you, the way they've done it, so they measure in cubic feet, per 100 cubic feet, which I had to convert for gallons. It's 133 to 1,000 gallons in 100 cubic feet. But so their bills, the way they're doing it, it's 288 this year, then it's 360, then 342, then 518, then 554. So they're making very aggressive jumps based on their rate study over 5 years, but keeping the rate flat for all household users. So the way they break it up, they have household, inside and outside of the city. If you are outside of the city in Alamogordo, you're charged double. So they actually do 200%. And then they have non-household customers. And they also sell their sewer service. They're doing something similar. So they're going from $1.50 in, again, this is cubic feet measurement, so multiply it by 1.33. 150, 188, 226, 271, 290. So you can like very, it's pronounced.
Okay.
And I should say one thing. I didn't say this before. When I gave that kind of model of what a discounted water rate would look like, that was assuming the highest water rate across the board for simplicity's sake. It would be, I didn't have time to actually do a model regression based on average and median consumption. Because the limit of the total water use is going to approach the highest tier rate as it hits infinity. Somebody who studied math is shaking his head, yeah.
So none of your things are based on the highest consumption, which is where most of the problem is being in the billing anyway, is with the people with the highest consumption.
Yeah.
Now, she's not here, but I remember Mr. Cole did say the reason this doesn't seem like it worked, it's because they rolled it out. We rolled it out in the highest consumption month ever possible, in the hottest year in 20 years, you know. So that's why it's so high, because of when we're not saying it didn't work.
That's what the
It
data
was just the
says.
way it was rolled out, and of course, the highest it could be. Of course, it was when we rolled it out instead of in the winter when when it was lower and they wouldn't see it as much, and they would have time to get used to it and all that. So that's why I don't want to say that it didn't work. It's just the way it was rolled out. It hit so many people in a bad spot in a bad time of year, and so I want her to know that I don't feel like it didn't work. And for one, I am kind of for the flat rate, and I like the idea of lowering the base rate and increasing the amount of water rate a little better, because people don't see it, because people don't see it as like it's not hitting them in the pocket as intense as it was if we just put it 10 cents or whatever on whatever he said on the amount of water on the way that the bill the way that the bill increased. And my other question is, and the progressive, is that how you're talking about to have the people help pay? Because like she said, the person that had that $9,000 bill, we cannot go and we cannot go back and dismiss that bill. So was that progressive thing you was talking about, how to make those people that ended up with the high usage, how kind of make them whole or make them feel like?
Yeah, so what it would be doing is the council should decide what they want the rate to be. If we're going to amend to a flat rate, you would decide what you want the rate to be, and then we would lower the rate from that for the 4 months to average for the 2 higher months against it.
Offsets the difference.
Yeah, so we'd offset the difference, and then we would move forward January 1st with a set rate.
So those people's bill that was the highest, their bill will go down a little bit, right? Is that what you're saying? I'm not even trying to think of lower consumption, because those are not the ones that are here in that meeting. That wasn't the line of people. The people that had regular low consumption. Those are not the people that we're.
Yes, ma'am.
That
if
are
you
not
applied
slapping
it
us
that
and calling
way,
us.
their bill would, in theory, go down. And then if you look at the handout of the water rates workshop, those first couple of slides, you can see that the consumption is going to go down necessarily in the months ahead. If you look at the second to last slide and you compare July fiscal year 23-24 to July 24-25, that's the second to last page. Total consumption in gallons and mean average consumed gallons. We're lucky we didn't try and implement a tiered progressive rate study in July of last year, because the consumption was actually higher than it was this recent July. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just remember as we go forward, we don't think like that's how I felt like we were sold a bill of goods when he showed us that bill, and it was like, oh, okay, that's $10, but he was at the very lowest range of people. He didn't compare it to somebody that was using 200,000 gallons. So that's why I felt like we sold a bill of good. We didn't get a average between what it would do to somebody using 200,000 gallons. And
so the max on the tiered system, the new tiered system at $5.66, which is double that of the old rate, the old flat rate, it maxes out at 18,000 gallons. So again, if we were looking at this in July of last year, when the average mean average consumption was 18,646, everybody's bill would have been through the roof, sky high. The average consumption in July of this year was 16,891, which is lower than it was last year. But again, that progressive, essentially punishing consumption. And as Mayor points out, we have a rechargeable aquifer. We want the consumption. We want that volume sales out of this.
But we don't want it at $5.66 per
opinion,
gallon.
No,
So
ma'am,
we want
do
the
not.
use, but we don't want it at I don't want it at that price. So I think as we continue, and I guess my other question, I don't know who it's for, how are we going to help the people that we know this change hurt the most? How are we going to help those senior citizens in that, that mobile home park or whatever, or the senior citizens that couldn't, how are we going to, my question still remains, how are we going to help the people that we hurt the most? Whether it be the low income, whether it be the senior citizens, how are we going to help them when with this change? I know somebody said we couldn't help with bills or anything like that or something, but how are we going to help that $9,000 bill? How can we as a council, when we change this, I know it needs to be changed because we hadn't had a rate increase in a very long time, so I know it needs to be changed. And I saw a couple of things I value. I love the opinion that he said about the base rate going down and that going up. My last question is the sanitation. We hadn't talked about that part and that increase. Why were the increases, all of them, so high? Because was it based on usage too? All the increases were based on how much you used?
So sanitation had a big jump in the base rate, and then it also had a tiered jump, but because it's because it's your winter average, people aren't seeing a massive jump in the same way in their waste bill as they do in just pure water.
So that's why we're still okay with keeping their base rate, rate so high.
Not that legal likes to be able to justify things. So, under state law, we have to charge reasonable rates. That typically means you have some form of support. And the state case law says you got to look to private industry, which there isn't a whole lot of around here. But being able to say, well, Alamogordo did this study and this is exactly what they're charging is a very nice thing to be able to point to from legal's perspective.
And I appreciate that we have different views from other cities, different numbers from throughout years. And so we have a lot of data. I see lots of data. We see lots of numbers. But I want to see how this is going to help us make a reasonable rate increase that does not dig into the pockets of those that don't need the worst. I still need to know, Mr. Cole, how are we going to help? I don't know who else to ask. How are we going to help the people that I don't want to say gouged because we didn't do it. It was just the way it played out in the highest month of the year.
Councilor Moore, I think we were misled. So I pulled up articles from back in April when these discussions were ongoing with the previous water superintendent. And he was looking specifically and quoting specifically at 3,000 gallons. On that tiered system, the top rates, you have to look at the average gallons consumed by month. And knowing those average gallons consumed by month, we would have seen in the month of July, just if we had looked back to last July, that it was going to hit the top tier in the middle of July. So Mr. Itema alluded to it a minute ago. We've had a lot of discussion on how to do this legally. Of course, it's an ordinance, so it's the law, and that's what we, the city staff, implement. And we believe it is implemented correctly based on the tiered system. I will say this, my personal opinion is that the tier system is a flawed system for this application for our city based on consumption. Again, I would prefer to see the consumption, the water volume sales. As Mr. Itema was talking about a minute ago, if we took the difference between the newly introduced tiered rate system and the old flat rate system and subtract that rate, that rate one from the other, the dollar, if depending on what the council decides to implement, if we went to $3.50 versus $2.43, that's $1.17 difference. If you divide that by 4 months and implement a piece of that each month, and or even go lower the first month than the old rate, then you get an offsetting effect, and we could calculate an offset.
And you could do that for 1 month, and then it would change.
Go
again.
below for
the
1 month, and then
the
each month thereafter implement the new increased rate on a flat system as opposed to a tiered system when consumption is going down in the winter. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so still my question still doesn't, so they still say if that person got that $9,000 bill, they are still going to be required to pay that bill, right, Mr. Alfred? They're still gonna be required because it was the way the system was set, and that's how many
That's the
gallons
law.
they use. And the bill, and the law said at that minute, that at that time, you're gonna pay $5.66. So they're gonna be required to pay the bills, no matter what, right?
According to the ordinance, yes,
But they're
ma'am.
not, second question, they're not gonna get turned off if they can't pay $9,000 the next month,
They have
correct?
the option of a payment plan. Mr. Alford, could you talk about that?
So yes, we are offering payment plans to customers as they come in. Normally, there's a different set of criteria, but we pretty much, if anyone's coming in saying that they're having problems paying the bill, we're offering the payment plan to them. It helps and it doesn't help because people that don't have the money, they're going to do the payment arrangement, which requires them to pay a certain amount every single month over a certain amount of months. But then the next bill is going to come out, and if they're already having financial issues, it's not really a fix. It's just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it and kicking it down the road.
But it's gonna have to be a Band-Aid because they can't pay $9,000 either. So I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying because they'll have to make a payment arrangement. But can we say as a council or something that we'll give them so many months or whatever to take care of it? I know because if they having to pay $500 on that $9,000 plus whatever their new bill is of $500, but I still think they would understand if that was allowed and they had a little more time, depending on how much over it was.
And
You know,
depending
if
on
it's
how
just
much-
over $200, then you don't need 8 months.
Correct.
But if it's over $9,000, then they would get a little more time to work that out. Y'all doing those things on individual basis?
Yes, we are. As customers come in and they're in distress, we are offering that on an individual basis. But to kind of go back to what Chad was talking about, where we kind of dip the rates and go back up, the whole thing about the payment arrangement working for us is going to be the matter of how much is that next bill. Because if I'm
Right.
working off paying down to $9,000 and then I get another $9,000, I'm just climbing in the hole. But if I have the $9,000 sitting there, then my next bill comes down to $1,500, and that's something I normally could afford. That gives them a little bit extra money to be able to go and pay towards that, and then slowly get that down, and so that way it washes out in the system without trying to go back and touch 19,000 accounts twice for August and September.
Can you talk, Mr. Alford, can you speak to your staffing levels and the ability to implement something in terms of offsetting the difference and having to touch each one of those bills?
So just for example, right now we're down about 6 positions in the water department. And it's just because it's been tough down there, and staff are falling off left and right because they don't want to
Don't like
deal with
this.
the treatment that we've been receiving. They don't want to deal with the abusive language, and so I've already lost, I think, 3 staff members just during this last 2 months, and so I'm actively trying to keep up with the questions the customers have, plus keep our staffing levels up while also trying to interview
Another
and get new
building,
people in the door. So it's just been a nightmare for us. But to speak to trying to roll it back, when we did that at the beginning of July with those first 5 cycles, it took us close to a month. If we're trying to do that for every single cycle for the last 2 months, I don't see with our staffing level how that's going to even be possible. Even if we had a team of just 10 people dedicated to that, you're talking months on end to get that taken care of, to go through and take all the confusing rates, get them rolled back to whatever the flat rate is, and then get all that adjusted out properly. It's not something, it's good in theory, but it's not something that we can feasibly get done and say, hey, it's going to be done by next month, and we're going to be able to get the normal bills out that we have to get out, because we have to keep pressing forward with the billing while also trying to fix backwards, and we don't have the manpower to do that.
Yeah, they had said we couldn't go back and change the rate for them anyway, that wasn't legal. So we could not legally go back and charge them the flat rate.
So Ms. Moore, I want the council to understand, if we were to implement something like that, the bills will be going out late. To get them correct, they will be going out late.
Well, we have to advertise and make sure everybody knew that whatever the changes the bill, whatever's going to happen, the bill's probably, if we're going to have to change any of the numbers in there, it's going to make them late. And I think they should understand that if they feel like they're going to have to pay a lower bill for the next month, I think, they'll be a little more understanding about the bills being late, as long as they're not going to get turned off.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
and when we first rolled this out, going from the flat rate system to the tiered rate system with very different rates at each tier. The potential for error went up exponentially with each tier. So going back to a flat rate, one rate across all tiers, simplifies.
Okay, thank you. Next, Council Lady Halverson.
So, Mr. Aitama, can I see that graph, Amalia? This graph that you created, this basically in September, if the council votes to do a flat rate of what, 350 or 380?
So this is assuming 360 with a drop in the base rate.
So in September, our
Right,
residents.
and I should say, these numbers are not, we'd actually let people who do numbers for a living. This was just illustrative of how it would look, and I assumed that everybody was getting charged 566, which is not the case. But so there'd be some tweaking to this, but those were just kind of 3 presentations of how it could look.
So starting in September, they'd get a lower bill, obviously.
Right. Or October 1st, we bill and we can. The way we can write the ordinance is that it will, so long as the bill hasn't gone out. Sorry, so some legal background is, so this is it's an unwritten contract under New Mexico law, or at least that's the view the PRC takes. So the contract isn't finalized until we issue a bill. Once we issue a bill for anti-donation purposes, that's when they've taken the water, we've applied the money to it. So if we write the ordinance saying that beginning the date of the ordinance, this is what shall go out, we would be billing for September. And we no longer, so September would not be the higher rate. It would only have been July and August. And so that's why those over 4 months you could deduct 25% of the total excess charged.
So you're giving us 3 options to start.
Yeah, or just generic how they look.
So essentially their bill would be lower, and then it would incrementally go up until January, then everyone would be at the same rate.
Right. So what we're assuming here is that you set the market rate at whatever you do. We look at the difference, and then we draw a line, effectively, look at what each month should be to make one individual whole, or 1 meter whole, because some individuals have less than 1 meter.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope I mixed that up enough for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Intima, I like your concept here of how to get this back, but what I'd like to see is some form of example of taking somebody that has a $35,000 or 35,000 gallons and see what that effect would have if we go to a 50% or 30% rating, whatever the council decides what the new rate's going to be, or the stair-stepped rate, so that we can see what we're talking about here. I just roughly took that mobile home park, and you've got to give them back 54% that they've been overbilled if you take these new flat rates. How are you going to get them back 54% so that you get them back to a flat rate that we all agree upon, or we will vote on, or we don't have to all agree upon, but the majority agrees upon? How do we know what that optimum number needs to be to get people back whole? Because I see we got 2 problems here. One is the problem of getting people back their money. That we feel that we know the flat rate is the flat rate is where we want to be, or feel like we're saying. I'm not taking a vote on that. I'm just saying me. And also on the sanitation rates as well, because I think also when we look at the sanitation rates, we got very aggressive on our commercial rates, very aggressive, that those were up substantially more. And so how do we get to know with confidence and tell the public, this is how we're going to handle this to get you back to whole? So you almost, and I guess this is what you've done here is,
Yeah, Councilor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, again, very rough modeling here because this is not my day job. But yeah, if you look at those are bills as they would appear. So if you had 200,000 gallons of water, the very top one would show your bill for just water was about $1,120, if I'm reading that correctly from up here.
Yeah.
Yep. And so and then you look at what your bill would have been if we did the 25 connection plus 360 per gallon, That would drop your bill to 737. So 200,000 gallons, about 3 acre feet a year, or 30 acre feet a year. A lot of water. But for a more typical customer, so myself, my bill would go from 158.35, which matches what my bill was, or more or less, and then it would drop to 125.80. And so you can see then the difference in the billings, 32.55, is what I'm hypothetically due. And so if you go down to the next one, it's applying 154. You can see that for somebody at 200,000 gallons, they're already going to have been paid back, or the 1 month gets paid back if we lower it to 154. And if you look at 257, they'd be underpaying by $205. So the issue is not that there's no way to make everybody equally whole without installing a tiered system again, is the problem. Unless we want to get really sophisticated in a way that I'm not sure we could handle with the system we have. But does that make, or did I convolute things?
No, what you're saying is if you really wanted to do it correctly, you'd go back to a tiered system and lower those rates based upon your consumption usage at each tier level. But there's got to be something that'll get you pretty close if you say, here's the flat rate, here's what you would have paid under the flat rate, and here's what the difference is.
Right. Well, so
everybody's consumption goes down in October, November, December.
and that's why we're doing that's at least why I modeled the 566 average for everybody, because their consumption is going to go down over those 4 months. So we're going to give them the highest rate that existed. We'll assume it's the highest rate that existed, and then rebate them from that. So if you look at, like I said, the top graph, 200,000 gallons, you would have overpaid by 382, and if we drop it to 154, which is the 2 months in a row plan, you'd get 408 back. So you'd actually end up ahead. But I figure that, and again, this is playing around with the joints here, but because you're going to be using less water in September than you did in August.
So, help me out there. Your far right-hand column says $817.64. What is that?
Oh, sorry, that's a separate calculation. That just shouldn't be there. Yeah, that was something. Oh, I'm sorry. 817.64 is 406.82 doubled.
So, you're saying under the current billing system, this person, if they're using 200,000 gallons, would pay $1,120?
Yeah.
And if you go to $1.54, they're going to pay $328 total?
Yep.
Or is that's accumulation, or is that just for the 200,000, between the 50 and the 200,000?
That's 20. That would be.
I know you're an attorney.
Let me show you what I did with that.
Janie, would you verify his numbers?
So let me mess that up here. And like I said, I would definitely send this to finance.
At cell C225.
So these cells are stacked on top of each other. So if we go to 360, your base rate's 25 because it's the first 3,000 included. Then it's 3.6 times 3 to get you to 5,000. Add that, 3.6 times 5 gets you to 10. Multiply it by 10, multiply it by 10, multiply by 10, 10, 10. And then you multiply it by 150. So that's how the flat rate was calculated. So if we go to the 154, I did it the same way. Multiply the 1.54 times 2 times 5 times 10 times, and then I just did it in my head. Same thing, 10 times 1.54 is 15.4, 15.4, and then 150 times.
Yeah, I just want to see what their total bill would be under the new system.
Total bill I with wastewater and sanitation. And
yeah. No, let's just talk about water now, because wastewater is a different issue.
Yeah.
Or it is an issue.
So under the new, if you're looking at the 3.6 with a base 25, a 200,000 gallon user would be 737.
737 would be their total bill?
Their total water bill.
Total water bill would be $737.
And that's-
under the current system, their total water bill is $1,220.55, correct?
Yep.
So you're saying between going, if we go to a flat rate of $360, their billing would be less $382.75, correct?
Yep.
Pardon?
That's only for the first month.
Right, and so we multiply it by 2, we can,
That's just showing a month. It doesn't matter, I don't think.
so that's the total, if you had used $200,000, that's how much, $765.50 is your net over bill.
765.
Right.
So under your potential 154 and $25 connection fee, you're at 817 would be
The amount they're underpaying now.
under billing number. So that's assuming that they use 200,000 gallons the next month,
Right.
thereabouts.
And like I said, without going into what's the average decline in use between August and September, because I didn't have
Now
that
you got a
number.
declining usage, and
Yeah, like I said, very simple model.
how do you get them whole again? You know, and I'm not sure that who knows how that'll be received. I don't know how that'll be. They'll just go, well, I guess I got a $737 water bill from here on out, and I don't know if they'll connect that. No, it was reduced down to $328 from $1,120. I don't know how you get that message out that you're really getting your money back. I don't know how you do that. And that's a, and we have a short time to figure this out. We've got till Thursday to get this figured out and so that we can come to some consensus on Thursday of how this is going to work. And it's across everywhere. It's not just residential, it's a commercial issue as well.
Well, the commercial, so the flat rate involves everybody, so the commercial end users actually really win.
And
If you go to a flat rate of 360, the commercial people.
big problem in sanitation rates.
Right, but the sanitation would also be flat, so they'd
Way
be seeing
off.
that. They'd be seeing that big drop too, though.
Yeah. Because sanitation rates, if you just take the simple math, and I'll try to complicate things, that I'll talk about water first. Water sales, I compared June, July, August, which I gave all of you counselors that sheet last time. June, we saw gallon increase by 30%, but we saw billing increase by 27%. That's reasonable. They're both in the same ballpark. July, we saw total billings increase by 5%, and the billing amount, gallons consumed went up 5%. Billings went up 6.45%. That's within reason, in my opinion. In August, we saw, compared to the previous year, we saw consumption drop by 3%, but we saw billings increase by 61.5%. So therein lies a problem. We know, and how you get that 61% down to where it needs to be to get it the right rate. Don't have an answer for that. Wastewater. And these just whole dollars. I don't have any gallons consumed. But wastewater for July of 23 versus 24 went up 105%. I don't know why that would take place, because we weren't on the July consumption for wastewater should not have been on a tiered system. But then August of 23 to August of 24, we went up 113% in wastewater. And I don't, we went from $467,000 to $996,000. So getting back to how do we get this back, at what rate we give it back, and what rate is it meaningful versus, I don't think our system, we don't know for sure, can go back and tell us exactly on an automated method to take the database from August of '24, set it to the side, extrapolate all that data, and run a new rate inside that data, and then take your August '24 stair-step rates and compare the difference and kick it out. Now, I don't see why that can't be done. It's probably a Tyler issue or somebody's issue out there that has all the data. But you should be able to extrapolate the data and set it to the side and run different scenarios with it. And that's where we haven't gone yet. I understand we're looking, but we haven't heard. And how we can hear by Thursday, I don't know. Because that to me would be, you don't have to manually calculate these things. It will be an automated process. And I think I've asked you that before, that we look into that methodology to see if that can't be done. And I don't know where we're at today to get that, but that to me would be, that fixes it right to the dollar for people on changing the rates. And same thing on sanitation. But I don't know if we can get there in time. And if we can't get there in time, Mr. Antema, can you still go back in time to get that by any laws that we would be changing?
You would write it in the ordinance to accomplish it expeditiously. So that's how you'd have to leave an ambiguity in the ordinance for us to exercise on your behalf. Is how and I can draft that up. That's not I mean,
would allow us to go figure out if that data can be reran at whatever rate we say. But then in the meantime, then we come back and go, oh no, can't get it done. And then we haven't done anything to reduce the rates.
Yeah, the safer bet is absolutely just
back in people's hands.
Yeah,
in theory, we're giving them money back in their hands.
Right. Yeah.
Charge them as much.
The safest way to keep people on equal footing, as if the rates had been set at what you set them on next Monday, is to do something like I proposed, and that's almost idiot proof. To go back, recalculate, only would delay relief. So to go and like I do not know Tyler, but from what I'm being told by water is that to calculate it out that way, assuming if Tyler can't do it, we absolutely need to go to a different system.
It would take over 2,000 man hours.
Right.
And that's doing 4 an hour to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
So it would take one person
a year.
365 days to get it done. Or
yeah.
Whatever.
Right. Yeah. If it can be done, if it can be done mechanically, that would change it. But I can't speak for Tyler.
Okay. Well, if we can kind of find out people's average consumption that goes down, we can tell by our whole dollars or our whole gallons what they are from the previous month, what they go down, and that will give us some kind of formula that will tell you what your dollar amount needs to be to get them whole. Because it's declining here, so your dollars that you're not going to charge as much are going to decline. But you know what that decline is on average because of what your total billable gallons are per month. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I want a head nod out of the treasurer.
This is a head nod for the record, right?
And the water department. Does that make sense to you all? So that we're trying to get the proper amount of money back into people's hands. Or credit, I shouldn't say credit, which is in essence giving them money back.
Essentially, we'd be lowering the rate to make up the difference. Yep.
So if we could see that, I think that would help us make a decision on Thursday as to what we're going to do here with rates. and stair-step down as our beloved Michigan fan has suggested, that it'll give us something to look at.
Yes, sir.
What we got. Not in abstract, but in definition, in a better defined.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I think the important part for us too then is to know, and this is not the council deciding anything, but at something of a poll to know where you guys are leaning towards the flat rate, because we have to design it with a rate in mind.
Yeah, I think the mayor's made that very evident.
Mayor, we're not going to make it
decision on that.
566 across the board.
Decision has been made on that. Thank you.
Okay, Council Lady Halverson.
Can you go back to slide 13, Amalia, please? So essentially, like Councilor Helderman said, getting this across to the public is going to be the difficult part, because that one, you had it right. Slide 13 on that. So with your tiered system and the incremental increase, say in September, they're going to still have a high water usage, so they'll have a set bill. And they'll cut down on the water usage in October, but the rate will go up, so then it's going to be the same bill. So by the time they get to January, it's going to be, does that make sense?
Yeah, January would be the true bill.
Yeah, but with their increased water usage, September may match January's bill. If they use a lot of water in September, not so much in January, their bill may be equal.
Right. And I think the best answer I can give is how we present it. I mean, we'd
Yeah,
have to do
because
it.
somebody's going to say, I only use this much water in September. I use this much in January. Why is the bill the same?
Yeah,
Trying
but-
to get that across to the public is going to be the hard part, but it makes sense.
But yeah, so I think the best we could do is put an insert saying old rate, new rate, your bill today,
Yeah,
and have them see all three.
okay, because it's going to be pretty much flat. I can see it being flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the hope, is that it stays flat even though they are getting a discount.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any,
Oh yeah, connection fee is an access fee. Yeah.
Can you use your mic, please? Your mic.
Yeah, the better phrase is base rate. And part of what that bill, people get upset that they have to pay when they don't use water, but we still have to send people to check their meter every month to make sure they're not using water.
So you want to say base rate instead of
base rate.
access? I'm just saying a lot of customers are having trouble with that. And I did, because I'm like, well, I need to access. I didn't access nothing, so I think that word also is throwing people off. So maybe if we can come up with a word that doesn't seem so threatening or something, base rate is, I like, it's not bad, or I think you said connection or something on your slide. But either way, I just think if we can come up with another word besides access, so it doesn't appear that they're getting charged every day, every month to access the trash can that I put outside once a month. I don't put
And
my
that's a
trash
great
can out every
point,
month.
Councilor Moore. In the new billing statement versus the old billing statement, and I know each of you has had constituents reach out to you about one statement versus the other. We could also use the council's guidance on those statements in terms of what we list and what we show. So the old statement would have had that all rolled up into one.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah, because that confuses people. That confused them a lot. They really, even though we've been paying it all along, now that I see it, what, I've been paying this. So I like that idea for one. I think it's really important the way we put out this information, as thorough as possible without being confusing, because whoever gave us that last one thought all those grids were going to help people, when for the most part it confused more people than it helped. So I just think, if I like that idea of this bill last year, this bill, and what the change is, or what it's going to look like. I think that's a better way for our constituents that aren't number savvy to understand without having to read 18 pages of color coded nothing. And so, I do like the idea of a flat rate. I know we're not talking about that, and I like the idea of the slow increments. I like the idea of the lower lower base rate thing that you talked about. I like those ideas. So I think we're heading in the right direction for all the wrong reasons. But I think if we just remain vigilant in our ideas that we help as many of the constituents as possible, we're not going to be able, I don't think, to make every one of them whole, but I think if people start to see that we're changing for the reason, and don't keep telling them we're raising this bill so you can help pay off our 13 billion, so don't don't put that out there like that. We're raising this because we need to raise 18 million to fix a hole in this. Don't say that. We just said the bills hadn't been increased and we need an increase, and don't necessarily put that, because to a lot of people that came to me is, so why do we got to pay for y'all needing the street to be fixed? Right.
We still have to do the other departments, so we need to kind of.
Oh, so we done with
if we're gonna do something with wastewater.
So sanitation is different, right? So there's a difference in sanitation, a difference in
my
wastewater.
understanding of it. I don't know if anybody's looked at it that much, but
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
so if we can, we have. Does this option here that we looked at here, this one we look at here where we go and we adjust it up to where they all come out about January, does that look somewhat similar or something that would be agreeable with people to work something like that out to try to get people back as much of their money as we can humanly possibly do with the staff we have?
Would it be the same for wastewater? That same line right there?
Wastewater's a little bit different.
So it won't look like.
Well, we can try to make it look something similar, but wastewater might have been a little bit different problem than this stacking this way.
Mm-hmm.
This way, what happens, we went to a whole new system that doubled the high-end users, so it created a real mess.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And this way would allow us to, as I see it, to come back to where we have I would probably like this personally, and I think we need to adjust some of the rates that we charge maybe for either set up I don't know if you can set up a rate for people who are on Medicare or Medicaid or whatever I don't know. So that might be something that might be worth, if you can look at that or not, on a disability basis. But sometimes a lot of people can be disabled just because it seems like they just don't want to work. There's a lot of different levels of disability out there that create some question. That's something to look at. I'm just saying, do you want to look at that? But I think this kind of deal to get us to where we can be somewhere by January, get everybody back on going, where we start from January on, we get at a base rate and get back into a workable solution that everybody can see, and you get people fixed the best we can. To me, it seems to be pretty good. And then I think we need to look at. You might have to look and see if we need to have some adjustments in the 3,000 gallon thing on the lowest rates, to where if these rates end up being regressive, we might need to look at that. Mr. Eiteman, I believe in your presentation, there was something in there that was similar about adjustments there.
Right, yeah, it really, the regressiveness at the low end of the tier is really dependent upon what the base rate is for the flat system. So yeah, like if we drop the rates $7 across the board for the base rate and then increase to $360, it looks about the same at the high end, and the lower income groups are paying just a smidge less than the higher income groups.
So it's not there's.
It's not totally off balance, but it's not a truly progressive system. But I don't think we're really, if we wanted to aim for that, you would do the tiered rate.
If you wanted to aim that, you would need a tiered rate?
Yeah, if you wanted a really progressive water system, you would need a tiered rate. Santa Fe is the example of that. Or they have
we
a
really don't need that.
right. No, and that's what I'm saying. It's not the goal. We're balancing two things. One is to use a flat rate for ease of administration and for ease of understanding, but to make sure that the people at the 0 to 8,000 gallon range, who people living in apartments, aren't getting overcharged as a result of the flat tier.
Councilor Halverson.
So, like Councilor Helderman was saying, can you give me, before our next meeting, examples of like an average water bill with this new rate system that you're proposing? And then someone on the higher end, like the gentleman that had the $9,000 water bill?
Yeah,
we can
absolutely. So
actually see what a water bill or what the increases would be per month?
Yeah, I get. I can't really produce a water bill, but we can give you a graph saying September, this is what they'd pay. October, this is what they pay. November, December, January.
And then you can include what the savings would be based off what the tier rate was, what we were charging.
Right.
Switch to. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That seem agreeable with Councilman Hildebrand?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe we got to look at something of how we're going to handle these wastewater rates, in the fact that the billing that we all receive from that mobile home park, that their wastewater rate, and I just took two different numbers, that if we just said we'll take the old rate on wastewater, take it up 50%, they would be overcharged about $3,400, not including tax. At 130%, they'd be overcharged by $3,500. So somehow we've got to look at how you're going to tier those commercial rates down to get those people whole in some degree to where it's under a flat rate system. And I don't know how you get there with that, but those have got to be addressed as well, because if you look at if we go to a flat rate system, and whether you use 130 or 150%, these people were overcharged over $4,000 off of a flat rate system. How do you get them back their $4,000 or $5,000, whatever we agree upon the rate structure to be? How do you get them back to that on sanitation or on wastewater as well? Commercial individuals are not that much of an increase because it's all based upon your winter consumption, but because the base rate on wastewater went up divided by 1191, it went up 122%, correct? 2650 versus 1191, it went up 122%.
At the highest rate, yeah. So I'd suggest we just treat the wastewater that.
And I have an issue with wastewater as well. By raising those rates that high, they got over $7 million sitting in their cash balance that we don't have a plan of how it's going to be spent. We haven't seen that plan, unless somebody else is up here seeing that plan. I haven't seen that plan.
Well,
I understand that, Mr. Mayor, but excuse me. We do not have a written plan from the wastewater of what their needs are to spend that $7 million plus whatever additional. They got another 110% more from the previous year. We don't have a plan. And I understand we have needs, but we don't have a plan. And so I would like to see something done that will get this rate to an effective rate of making at least this mobile home park somewhat whole to a rate that we can all agree upon and go from there. So, Mr. Mayor, you can have the floor.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I know on the waste department is that there is a plan out to look, that we need to add a number of acres to our pond to purchase land, so to use for distribution of the solids or the liquid waste that comes out of there to distribute it and put it to use. We clean the water up the best we can, then you put the other out for fertilizer or whatever out into the fields. But, okay, Councilor Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple things really quick. Did I see, Mr. Eintema, you did mention that it would behoove us to have a form of an audit at some point, someone to come in and look at the system. Did I hear you say that in the beginning?
Yeah, doing a rate study is probably a good idea.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I
Oh,
heard
no,
correctly.
yeah. Alamogordo's is 128 pages. I didn't print it out for you, but if you just Google Alamogordo rate study, you'll see what one done by professionals looks like.
Okay. All right. The next thing is on disconnections. Where are we at right now on people who've been disconnected? What can we kind of expect for October? Or do we have people being disconnected?
We're not disconnecting presently.
We're not disconnecting presently. How long are you looking at actually maintaining that? Because I know we have some bills that are past due. I know we have a lot of stuff going on, right?
So that's ultimately up to Mayor and Mr. Cole's discretion. Right? They would refer a case to me if we were going to do something like that. But my general understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, is we'd wait till whatever progressive rate implementation scheme we use, we wouldn't disconnect until everybody's been made whole through the lower rate. So it'd be January.
Okay. So it'll be a moment. Next question. As far as the transparency of the bill that we were aiming for, I think our setup is actually beneficial. I know the access fee, I recognize that our people are confused by it right now. I just continue to say that this is us being transparent. You've paid it all along. The one thing that I would say is, and if you cannot do this, your GRT, your tax on each one, I think, it's been kind of recommended to me that we actually just do a GRT tax of the whole bill, and it would actually it would, minimize the verbiage, kind of clean it up a bit. I thought was a great suggestion that was given to me.
And for the councilors who weren't aware, that 5% GRT goes to the state. We don't see a cent of it.
Right. So and I didn't know if we had to actually look at that per enterprise fund but if we could do one generalized fee, I think that would make it a little bit cleaner. I'm also going to thank Councilman Heldenbrand. I really appreciate a lot of what he's just said as far as us being mindful. But I'm going to go back to I need clarity on. So today we have a special council meeting, correct? Following. What is on Thursday? Do we have a special? I was under the impression that we had a special council meeting today.
Thursday's legal committee. Next Monday is the special council.
Okay, so the special council, because some of us were very confused. We thought we were voting on something today, and then we heard that there's something on Thursday.
Sorry, we have a meeting noticed for the legal committee, and since we've noticed it as a quorum, you can bring it up as a discussion item without it having an OMA issue.
Okay, so the point is to get it passed through legal on Thursday and then special.
Oh, no. The legal, we can discuss it more and clarify things and present our update to a full body. But next Monday is the actual public hearing.
Okay, and so on Thursday, you're having the full body attend the legal committee?
No. It's just a legal committee, but you always should feel free because we have a good time there.
I actually love the legal committee. It is lots of fun. You're exactly right. Last thing that I'm going to say is this makes me extremely nervous because we are trying to make a lot of changes, a lot of discussion in a short period of time, and we spent a very long time discussing the other, and actually I believe we missed a whole bunch there. One of the things I have been asking for is some form of a pause. I don't necessarily have the answer on what that pause looks like because I'm not telling you not to continue charging rates. What I'm saying is let's figure out a base rate or something that we can get done, and then we can actually help Mr. Alfreds out by sitting down and having several months of conversation on this. I think it is actually foolish of us to actually try to figure out something long-term at this point because we have had overwhelming emails. I don't know that we actually have a good grounding. I think what you guys presented today, thank you very much. That's the kind of information and stuff but I've been wanting to see, so I do appreciate your extra hard work on that. But there again, I want to ask the counselors to be mindful of, you know, I guess not today because we're not going to pass it today, but the 30th, to actually consider creating something that will give us about 6 to 7 months to truly assess this and clean it up as best we can without rushing our billing department and our legal department and our, you know, all the different departments that are involved in this, because Mr. Cole, as you said, this is going to touch every single person. You're already short on your staff. You're already behind, and just throwing this at you, smacking you with it again, I don't think that's a responsible decision for us, but that's my personal opinion, and I've been pretty consistent on that one.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Try to answer part of Councilman Hildebrand at the last finance meeting.
Councilor Corn, try to pull that closer to you.
Okay. Well, I got so much stuff here. But at the last finance committee meeting, we got a partial plan on capital projects for the wastewater. They need to replace that lift station at Roswell Industrial Air Center. That's $3.1 million. They need another Vector truck. That's they say 548. Need a new pickup and 2 UTVs at the power plant because they've worn them out. That's $3.780. $3,780,984.64. Now, on the couple of things, this on the water side, 36-inch water line replacement project on Montana, where we've had a bunch of breaks here in the last couple of weeks. That's $3,931,927.95. Now, on that point, Mr. Mayor, you'll recall that the previous line breaks that were further north than what has been breaking lately, we had to move $1.3 million out of the general fund to cover the bill that was generated from that. I don't have a clue what the cost is going to be for these latest breaks. Don't know. And then they need some utility trucks with cranes, a new backhoe, and a hydraulic jackhammer attachment for the backhoe. That's $4,575,340.71. Now, we estimated $8 million to repair the city tanks. We're going to have a bid at the next city council meeting. That's quite a bit of savings from this. I think it's less than $4 million. But there's going to be the possibility of change orders when they drain those tanks down and are able to really get in there and look at them. They're going to be pretty high. I think there's going to be a bunch of those. Because when, as you know, Mr. Mayor, when you drain the water out of a tank, other things show up. And so, I don't know. We may use all $8 million. I don't know. Not to mention the 42 miles of pipe that is in critical need of repair and replacement. The cost of those is estimated at $23 million. So these are not, these are real requirements that we need to try to meet at some level.
Okay. So, I think we have, seeing no further comments, I think we have some level of, Mr. Eintman and Chad have some level of understanding where we are. Is that a fair statement? You both, I think. So where we're looking at this and looking at coming up with a plan, something to get something similar to this, get us through this by January, so. Okay, next, and I think we want to tackle wastewater. Does anybody need a break before we do that, or we just, Mr. Cole, what would your choice be? Would you like to do wastewater now, or are you prepared for that?
I'm not prepared for wastewater. I've looked at water specifically. I have not prepared for wastewater. And as you know, our wastewater manager has had a family member.
He had a problem, so
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's it. Yeah, our Lorenzo lost his father, so that's why he's not here today. So, okay. Well, is there anything else that you feel you need to bring before us?
Mayor, no, I appreciate the council. I think we all care about this community and want to get this right. I'm on board with that as well. I get a water bill. We all get a water bill. We all have family and friends that get water bills, and we need to get this right. And so the guidance you've all given us today and the questions you've asked are very helpful. We worked diligently through the weekend, as you can tell. We broke this up in pieces and hit the data during the weekend to get information that could help guide this process. And so I appreciate the feedback we've gotten here today, and we'll put together some more information based on that same feedback, and I think we can come up with a win for this community.
Okay, thank you. You know, I would just like to point out, it's my understanding that most of the sewer pipes that we have in our community are also cast iron or ductile steel. I believe that's correct. And when we saw the pipe that was out here the other day that was here, you have to understand that pipe has had nothing but fresh water in it. And when you have pipes that it will be of the same type of material, and you have, one of your greatest things when you have wastewater, you have a lot of acid. Your pipes are carrying an awful lot of acid, which has not been treated or anything for any means to alleviate the acid eating on the metal. So while we can look and talk about the water pipes, and you saw the ones there, these down here that were from a ½ inch, were down to 6/100 of an inch thick or whatever before they popped. I would just point out that when you have metal pipes that have been in acid, your rate of corrosion is increased a great deal. How much, I don't know. I don't particularly. I've done things with water pipes. I've kind of tried to avoid the other kind of pipes and leave that for the pros. And but just so you know that could very easily be a huge problem that we have to come across later. Most of the companies now, when they replace water lines, they use a plastic pipe and go down, and they don't dig up the old pipes. They leave them all there, and then they just tee off and take them back to the meters. It's a lot harder to do that with sewer pipes, and they are typically deeper in the ground than water pipes, because all that stuff, it all has to go downhill. So you might keep that in mind about other issues that will be we're having to address now. But I know that they were talking of some things they've talked about is the capacity of our plant out there, that we need to make some improvements in our plant, but we will work on that as we go through with get the whole plan. And I would just, a lot of these departments, whether it be solid waste or any of them, they do not have replacement plans for their vehicles. And that is something what, ongoing maintenance and repairs, there should be some kind of a plan for replacing police vehicles and Vector trucks and all that equipment that you have there that you have to use. And so I guess that's it. Is there anything else that anyone care to bring before the council at this workshop? No more smiles? Okay, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you. Thanks everybody who was watching. Bye.
Thank you, Jeff.